Doctor?
Why am I the best choice as a candidate? I am not your stereotype Republican. That's very obvious. I showcase what is best about the party. The inclusiveness of our party is what I represent. A person, an immigrant, a first-generation immigrant who landed on the shows in Kennedy Airport with $7.50, now seeking the highest office in our state, just shows the possibilities that are there for anyone and everyone who wants to take those possibilities. So for me, if you have a message that resonates, and you've talked about the platform, the pro-growth, pro-business, addressing the inefficiencies in the state, looking at healthcare and pension reform are the top things in my platform. That's the message. And if you have a messenger that connects, a messenger that's able to communicate, and that's what I do as a physician. I see people from all walks of life, day in and day out, including today, till 5 o'clock before I drove down to come here to Danbury. So when you communicate with people day in and day out, address their concerns, and then come up with a game plan, skill sets that you need day in and day out to lead our beautiful state.
Thank you. Next question is going to be from Danbury News Times, Gene DeVale.
One of the candidates who's not present tonight has proposed that the income tax be eliminated in Connecticut. Income tax supplies about $9.5 billion a year, a little under half the state budget. Do you favor repeal of the income tax? And if the answer is yes, how would you fill that $9.5 billion hole?
Peter, why don't we start with you?
Great, I get to start again. All right, how about that? That's okay.
You're welcome. 5-point plan.
Yes, that is a nice thing to say. However, we are in a deep hole. It is a good target, perhaps not to eliminate the income tax, but to bring it down. But it has to be done in conjunction with, before there were taxes on dividends, income, but you have to value that with what citizens are we chasing out of the state. So I would say at the beginning, I don't know that we can just eliminate taxes because we have to pay our bills. I think as a single platform that is not a winner, that's not being forthright with the citizenry, that could be a form of pandering. You know, when politicians say, I'm going to reduce your taxes, I'm going to reduce government waste, that's been said since the beginning of time. Yes, we do need to reduce our taxes. We cannot afford any more tax increases or revenue increases. Thank you very much.
Eric?
If we can make a tax for all citizens of Connecticut, one number tax, but make it a sliding scale based on gross income, I believe that would be a great idea.
Joe?
Yeah, it's a fairy tale, it's pandering of the worst kind. It's similar to Tom Foley's promises. It won't work. Great idea. We all want to eliminate sales tax, income tax, property taxes. Everyone is a Republican and a conservative wants to do that. But I believe you're addressing Mayor Mark Boughton, and Mark's a great guy, but the fact is this is another problem. That's one of the reasons I'm in the race. All of these ideas that don't work because we're in such a hole, the public is uninformed and they may believe a Mark Boughton on this issue. If anything, I want to accelerate our payments to unfunded liabilities. We need to level ourselves off for 2 to 3 years. With all the changes of Republicans we will make to capital, we still need to accelerate payments and get ourselves, it's like paying down the credit card. So it's going to take a few years to stabilize the ship in layman's terms, and then you'll see the Republican plan over time to start phasing out all taxes.
There are actually 3 candidates that have talked about eliminating the income tax. Mayor Boughton from Danbury, Bob Stefanowski from another part of the state, and exploratory candidate Tony Boucher for different points in time. But unless and until they have a plan that shows how they're going to pay for it, it's flat not credible. Mayor Boughton has already said, oh, well, I'm going to replace part of it with other taxes. Oh, and I've got ideas about how we can save money, but they're all generalities, if you will. These are the typical kind of promises that we have here from career politicians that have gotten us to where we are today. They're not going to get us to a better place. Let me be clear, though. I am for tax cuts. I am for tax relief. But I'm also putting our finances in order and make sure that we balance our budget, which is what the Constitution requires. And we're the Constitution state. It's time that we start following our own Constitution.
Thank you, Doctor.
To say that we're going to eliminate the taxes, and as you very appropriately pointed out, $9 billion is what we're talking about that we get as a sales income tax. How can we, between the sales tax and the income tax, $13 billion, how are we going to be able to replace that? There's got to be a plan which has got to be rolled out. I have not seen a plan at all. Promises, yes, it can be done, it should be done, but that's one thing. It's just wishful thinking. We have to do it in a logical way, in a stepwise fashion. I would begin with businesses. Let's look at the business entity tax. It's a small amount, $250 every other year. But if you eliminate that as a starter, you send the right message to businesses that Connecticut is pro-business, is for growth, and that's the message we need to send. Not just make promises we cannot keep because we want to win an election. Promises have to be made that can be kept.
We're joined now by another candidate, Steve Sitnick, who's joining us. If you could just give us a little introduction to yourself and then respond to the question, which was, another candidate in the race has talked about eliminating the income tax. It's upwards of $9 billion. If you're in favor of it, how would you replace that? But please introduce yourself.
Great, thank you, Marty, for having me here. Good evening. My name is Steve Sitnick. I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut. I went to the U.S. Naval Academy. Oh, that one? Okay. I attended the U.S. Naval Academy down in Annapolis and I'm a trained electrical engineer. After that, I came back to Connecticut to do my nuclear engineering training up in Windsor, and then went down to sub school down in Groton. Spent a good 4.5 years on a nuclear submarine chasing Russian submarines under the polar ice cap. So for me, Connecticut is not two area codes of 203 and 860. It is a state, one state of underutilized assets. After I got out of the Navy and got my MBA in business, I went out to the Silicon Valley. I wanted to really see what it takes in ecosystems to create these innovative jobs. So I've worked with creating 3 great companies that people use, large multinational corporations, around technology that you and I use every day. So when you pause your TV or maybe this broadcast, order a movie on demand, that woman's Siri on your iPhone that you may talk to, those are all technologies that I had a hand in creating. And I'm proud to say that because we need jobs like that here. And I've run and turned around and built organizations to do what Connecticut needs to do. So I think the question was the income tax and how to address it. I agree that we've had 3 candidates who've come out and said, we would like to get rid of the income tax. I think most people in Connecticut would like to, but until there is a plan to address it, I think it is fairy tale. I think this is what people do when they want to pander for votes. We need to have a thoughtful plan if we want to reinvent Connecticut. We have to do 2 things. 1, restore fiscal stability to our system, and it's not going to be easy, and it's going to take time, it's going to take people to be committed to the state of Connecticut, number 1. The second thing is we have to restore our ability to compete with an economy around the ecosystems that I've been involved in the Silicon Valley, in Minneapolis, and Rochester. So I believe you can have a thoughtful approach to it, tax that immediately evict people from Connecticut, like the estate tax. For every $1 it brings into the state, 4 has been rushed out the door for the last 4 years in a row. And if we would have preserved those people, you know, we probably could have delivered a middle-class tax cut and had some money left over afterwards. So I am absolutely for addressing our income tax structure, reducing the burden, but the first thing we have to do is get our deficits under control, and that is first and foremost, the efficiency of our state government is 20% too large. It's outdated, it's overexpensive, it doesn't deliver the services that you deliver and your family need to be delivered to you, and if we don't address that, we will never get income tax rates down.
Okay, any rebuttal, response? Did they answer the question?
Just want to follow up on something I thought I heard Mr. Visconti say, that eliminate all taxes someday.
No, I said, wouldn't that be great? In other words, you want another fairy tale? We want to eliminate, we would like to eliminate everything, but that's not sustainable.
Okay, the next question is for Mac Reed from the Ridgefield Press.
Thank you, Marty. The State Department of Transportation recently announced cuts, a combination of plans to increase railroad fares and also decrease railroad service, including cuts on the Danbury branch line, which serves this area, that will eliminate all trains on the weekends and many midday off-peak hour trains during the work week. And obviously the reason is money, and I'm wondering what you guys think of those reductions, and if you're against them, how would you propose to keep money going into the rail service, or does it reduce?
Okay, we're going to start with Steve.
That's
New
me.
guy, you get the rough thing, and then you, Peter, you'll have plenty of time to gather your thoughts and have a brilliant response. So we'll put you on the hot seat. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The result of what we've seen here is our rising fixed costs. 53 cents out of every dollar we spend now is forced out with pensions and healthcare costs to retirees and debt service. And that's the reality of why we're in the situation. We spend more on pensions than we do on transportation. So these cuts are draconian. They will change people's lives. They will hurt economic advancement of our state, which we cannot accept right now, as well as quality of life. So I think we need to look hard at how do we make that solvent? How do we truly look at the Special Transportation Fund and treat it as a lockbox so that we can actually deliver the services we need? Because we are looking at a $100 billion infrastructure investment that's necessary. And like any good business I've been involved in, you have to look at the revenue side and the expense side, but in the end, you need to deliver a quality product that people need to get to work and live their lives.
Transportation is the economic engine of our state. Transportation is not just getting from place A to place B. Of course, it does that, but it's much more than that. And what we need to do is look at our Department of Transportation right from the bottom up. And why is it we are where we are? For me, if we've got to look at the things that we need to do in the department, which is going to be one of my priorities, is keep the money that is supposed to go to transportation, the Special Transportation Fund, that's sacred. We cannot let it be raided and get back into the general fund. We fight that, the concept of a lockbox, consistently and constantly. Again and again we've been told that there is a phenomenal relationship between private businesses and they want to get involved, the private-public partnerships. Those partnerships I would encourage, so therefore the money comes into transportation, and at the same time the state gets to see, oversee, and the whole program is transparent.
Our transportation system is wholly inadequate, whether it be our rail system, whether it be our surface transportation system. On the surface side, when you come into Connecticut, you see a sign that says, "Welcome to Connecticut." Underneath it, it should say, "Prepare to stop." Our rail system is worse than it was 30 years ago, less reliable, less safe, more congested. We've raided all of our trust funds. In Connecticut, we have trust funds that I would say are, you can't trust them, they're not funded. We have to dedicate these revenues for their intended purpose. But what's happening? It's about money. It's about money because we've lost control of our budget. A significant majority of our budget, and growing much faster than the rest, are state employee compensation and benefits and debt service costs. We have to restructure those. And in addition to that, we need to pursue public-private partnerships. We also need to look to electronic tolling, where we impose the burden on out-of-state vehicles, which is possible, in order to be able to have revenues to be able to do what we need to do with infrastructure.
Thank you for the question, Mac. Two of my grown children live in Manhattan, and it's always a task to pick them up down in New Haven. rail system coming up to Hartford is going to be changed, but it's just not high speed. Infrastructure right across the board. At the Transportation Forum, December 15th of last year, I spoke about tolls. I spoke about tolls with the governor 4 years ago. And my plan then in 2014, as well as today, would be to bring tolls in the border. Now, the way the Federal Transportation Department works, you have to have them everywhere. We are going to need a waiver from the Trump administration. Connecticut is a national security corridor up 95. We need something that fits Connecticut. And if you are a commuter and you work out of state, you can get, and by the way, the state legislature studied my idea, didn't give me the credit last year, about giving tax deductions or tax credits to commuters, so that the only people within the state of Connecticut that would get would have to pay tolls would be people traveling, vacationing. The other thing to look at is the fact that debt clocks, revenue clocks across the border where their cameras are, this is the real lockbox. Imagine driving from Greenwich to New York and you see the cameras. Across the top, there will be a revenue clock. If the public sees $2 billion a year, 1.5 billion, whatever the number is, on all borders, imagine what happens if they try to steal that money. The public will be outraged.
Eric?
Transportation is definitely an issue. I am a manager of a construction supply corporation, Colony Hardware, supervisor for the drivers, one of them. And our delivery system is the backbone of our economy. It'll make it or break us. The electronic tolls on the entry points is a great idea. I set them for 2 years on the entry points only. We must encourage people to take more public transportation, but it's a must that we make. One of the reasons why Amazon did not come to Connecticut is because we did not have adequate transportation for their people in order for them to get to and from work. And the fund, we must leave it alone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reed. And like the other candidates, I am also concerned when rail service is diminished, and that does not help the working people of this state get from one place to other just to make a living. But I think it's clear that our rail seats are all subsidized by the federal government. And this is a clear failure of leadership by Senators Blumenthal, Senators Murphy, Congressman Himes, to get adequate funding into this state to support our mass transit system. Perhaps they are more concerned with their photo ops and getting their fundraising together for their re-election campaign. And it is their failure. Thank you very much.
Okay, next up, we're going to have something fun. We went out on the street at great expense and interviewed some man on the street, just citizens that wanted to ask the candidates questions. There are 3 questions that were asked. It's kind of a potpourri, and this is a very high-tech situation we got here. And as soon as I get it zeroed in, we're going to get the mic up. We are ready. This is the first question from a college student in Connecticut. I was at the fitness center, Dave, today. You can tell.
Okay, we're ready. We can't hear it in here. We can't hear it in here. Okay.
Is it on speaker?
His question was, what about the cuts to the state school budget? What are you going to do about that? Hold the line, though. You're doing very good with that, because we have another one here.
Okay.
This is another candidate. I'll put the Okay, he had a question about the economy, and this last gentleman was frankly my favorite because he was very short in his comments, and it was very loud, which I appreciated. So here we go with the last man on the street question. And then a car alarm went off, so that ended that. But the three questions are, the first question is, what are you going to do about the state funding for the schools and tuitions going up? It was a college student at LA Fitness in Norwalk concerned about that. The second question was a general question about the economy, the man in the yellow jacket. He actually said he had friends that had a $2.6 million house they bought in Weston, and they couldn't sell it, and they got it down to $1.7 million right now, and they still can't sell it. And then the last gentleman, fast and loud, he said, what about the new federal tax plan, and how's it going to hit the taxpayers of Connecticut? Again, we're going to put you on the spot. You can answer one or all of them, but you got to do it in a minute and a half.
Okay, thank you. I'll take the question about housing values, because housing values have been decimated in this state. And housing values, when they drop, are a sign of lack of demand. People don't want to move in and buy your house. I believe that comes because people don't see opportunity here. They don't see the reason to invest in a region, bring your family here to take a job. So to do that, we need to create a vibrant economy. How do we do that? We do that, one, the previous question about getting people to work quickly on roads, on rails, and getting them there in a cost-effective way. We do that by keeping taxes lower so people can afford to live here. That means reducing the size of our government and making it more efficient by 20%. It also means addressing our fixed costs and making them unfixed costs so that it's affordable for someone to take on the burdens of taking on that house. And finally, it's about having jobs that people want to have that prove a good wage for people, and that takes creating an ecosystem of people who are working for small, medium, and large businesses, who are educated in our school systems, and can get a job and get out from underneath the debt that they're taking on. So my focus is exactly that, to work for the hardworking people, the forgotten people of Connecticut that can't sell their house, can't pay their bills, have student debts, and how do we create a vibrant ecosystem so that you once again can make the living that you want for your family and yourself.
The economic climate in our state has to change, and it will change. And when that happens, you will see the positive ripple effect across all these various avenues that were addressed in these multiple questions, whether it be as far as schools are concerned, whether it be home values, and so on and so forth. So for the first thing, the first and the foremost thing we need to do is to make sure we have an economy that is thriving. We have a climate where businesses want to come to Connecticut, stay in Connecticut, and most importantly, grow in Connecticut as well. It is the business climate which correlates very, very well with the real estate climate. And therefore, to see the home values dropping is not a surprise, given what we have done in the last 7 years under the current administration. 2 biggest tax hikes we have had. And as a state representative, I fought for those hikes, obviously did not support them, but unfortunately, they are the harsh reality of our state. It's only when the economy changes will we see the brighter future, and that will happen. As far as student loans are concerned, it is important for us to realize that as the tuitions go up, unfortunately, where is the tuition going up? What is it that we are getting? Is that money being spent on administration? Is the money being spent on management or on tuition itself? Does it go directly to the student? We do not have the transparency. That has to change.
Well, as a certified public accountant, I know a little bit about tax laws, and I would give you 3 key points with regard to the federal tax reform. First, there's a little question in my mind that they will result in additional economic growth in the United States and will improve the competitive posture of the United States as compared to other global economies. At the same point in time, the effect on individuals will be mixed, depending upon what your income level is. However, the effect on Connecticut will be to further reduce our competitiveness, because we are a high tax state, and therefore with the loss of state and local tax deduction for high income individuals, limiting it just to $10,000, that will further undercut our competitive posture, which further serves to reinforce the need to put our finances in order to get our taxes down. With regard to student loans, we've only got so much money. We've talked about the fact that The mandatory spending is over 50%. It's growing faster than everything else. We've got to get that under control. And with regard to housing prices, I've already mentioned that my home value's gone down at least a third, while my property taxes have gone up 55%. In fact, I was recruited to run for governor by several CEOs who care a lot and know a lot about this issue. William Ravis from William Ravis Realty, Bob Cento, the largest developer in the state, John Myers, CEO of GE Pension, former GE Pension and Asset Management, $240 billion under management. This is about our future. We have to recognize also that most people, their largest single asset is their home value. And it's going down, and we're taxing people out of their homes. This has to stop.
Joe?
Yeah, I live in West Hartford Center, a very affluent town and a very affluent area. Taxes on my home are $9,600. The $10,000 cap will definitely hurt because that's without municipal taxes on cars and without income tax deduction. But this is what we get. We live in a blue state that thinks they can just continue to tax. Right now, the Democrats are looking at the legislature with the governor to do an end run around, as well as Cuomo over in New York. It's not going to work because it's going to be unconstitutional, where they can actually have an employer pay the federal tax, this goes in the weeds a little bit, and then try to deduct it from the federal tax. They want to rip off the federal government. The federal government, America is moving forward. We're going to hit 4.5% GDP, but not in Connecticut. So the best thing the public can do right now, and for those people that want to move here or come to Connecticut, is realize that this is the battle of our lifetime in the state of Connecticut. Put Republican, any one of us, put the adults in charge, we're going to go through a lot more pain. I told you what was coming 4 years ago. You're living it today with the deficits. When Tom Foley and Governor Malloy all lied to you, gave you misinformation, and they knew better, we cannot do that. None of us candidates can do that. We have to tell you the truth, tell you what's coming. There is more pain coming, but we can get out of this with the right plan, with the right leadership, and the state capitol must be taken over by Republicans, or nothing any of us up here can do will work.
As far as taxes and property values, I noticed that a lot of companies and investors outside of Connecticut are buying up properties all over Connecticut. And like I said, I didn't hold office before this. I was United States Navy Construction Battalion CB, and I worked for a Construction Supply Corporation. One of the things I believe we should do is, instead of letting them buy the land, lease the land to them so we could gain revenue. Also, the people of Connecticut, we also have landlords that are outside of Connecticut that have properties that run them down, won't do anything about fixing them up. All they want to do is collect the money for the rents and leave them in despair, which reduces property value all around them. We must hold them accountable and fix this problem that we have.
Thank you very much. By way of background, in addition to being a builder, which I've done for the past 20 years, building new homes down in Fairfield County, I'm also a realtor. And I see the impact of the negative economic climate and our poor fiscal state on realty. And I hear the stories of people who cannot sell their homes even though they would like to. And the business of Connecticut has been government, but the business of Connecticut needs to be business. And the way we have to do this is face the facts that we have a huge pension liability around our neck. And there can be no pandering. And we must right-size our government and go to average in the compensation of our kind and well-meaning state employees. And we must stop 50 years of paying pension for 20 years of work and get 401k. This is to be honest with our citizens. We can no longer have this high spending. Thank you very much.
I'm for the federal tax plan, the Trump administration, and not just because I'm a Trump supporter. America collectively is moving forward. All the states that have just tried to be everything to everyone has caused us to be in this position. And so, like I said earlier, my home is $9,600 in taxes. We go over the cap. Go to a town in the 2nd District. Go to a town like Scotland, where they may even have to break the towns up. There's areas in a lot of Connecticut where they're not going to be affected by this. The affluent areas, I'm not an affluent person, but I live in an affluent area, we're going to be penalized. We're the ones who need to lead the way in the very affluent areas of Connecticut to turn around the state government. This is why this race is so important, because we're looking for the first time for Democrats who are conservative, that are in affluent areas, to come on board with us, put the leadership in place at the state capitol to turn around Connecticut, because the federal government in America is moving forward. And so I have to side with America. I have to side with the nation and say, listen, we got an F, we did it wrong. I'm not going to turn on a plan that's great for the country just because our state did it wrong. That's why I'm actively involved. That's why I'm running for governor.
So you support,
Dave?
you
support the plan.
You support the
I support the plan. I'll have to pay the money. And I'll have to pay for a lot of mismanagement by the state. But Democrats in the last 8 years, especially Governor Malloy and the Democrats,
Is it federal?
no, I understand, but because they did not control spending, we're here now at the state level, so that our taxes at the municipal level are through the roof, and our state taxes are through the roof. This adds insult to injury. And so we've already been injured, and the federal government is hurting us, but indirectly because we're a blue state who has spent lavishly. And we're going to pay the penalty for it. But as an individual, not just because I'm a Republican, I need to look at the whole United States and say to myself, why did the federal government do this? They have $20 trillion in debt through the Obama administration, who doubled it. So they have their own problem there. They need to keep the country solvent. We're going to need to do that in Connecticut. So if you look at the big picture, it's a complete different analogy. And yes, it's going to hurt. You're going to have to pay. But that's why we're all active trying to run for governor, and all different levels of government to turn our state around. If we can lower our property taxes and our state taxes, then eventually we will save the money. Car tax. I drive old vehicles. A lot of people are now driving old vehicles because they can't afford Audis and all these cars. And this is another thing you're going to see coming next. Beyond property value devaluation, you're going to see people getting rid of their cars that can't swim because that tax $10,000. It's all a problem for Connecticut. But Connecticut didn't learn its lesson. It didn't learn it in 14. It's going to learn it now.
Well, a few facts, okay? First, not all states have income taxes. Not all states have sales taxes. But all states have property taxes. And our property taxes are among the highest in the country. Too high. We've got to do something about it. And we're taxing seniors out of their home. This is going to affect me. I pay more than $10,000 a year in property and income taxes. But you know, low-income people, it's not really going to affect. High-income people, it is going to affect in a negative way, which undercuts our competitive advantage. But frankly, some upper middle-income people are actually going to be better off. Why do I say that? Because they've changed something called the alternative minimum tax. So not as many people are going to be affected by that. And so some individuals who were subject to the alternative minimum tax before got zero deduction for state and local taxes. But now they'll get a $10,000 deduction for state and local taxes that otherwise they would have gotten. Here's the bottom line. We can't control federal policy. That's the job of our U.S. senators and U.S. House members. And they're doing a terrible job. They're not representing the interest of this state as it needs to be represented, especially given how serious our situation is. But we're running for governor of Connecticut, not for federal office. We need to focus on what we can do. And the fact is that this federal law is going to serve as a tremendous incentive and imperative for us to put our finances in order, to get the size of government right-sized, to get spending under control, and to reduce taxation over time to create a better future.
Doctor?
The
You're on, Doctor.
Thank you, thank you. The overall tax haul is definitely a step in the right direction. Yes, there's going to be pain in this process. There's no question about that at all. But when we look at middle-class citizens in our state, when we look at people that are going to be impacted significantly, you will see at the end of the day, it is a good plan. Yes, people who are going to pay much higher than that are going to be negatively impacted. But what is happening already, we have seen in our state. Our millionaires are leaving our state.
Yep.
Our billionaires have already left. We have hardly about, what, 2 or 3 billionaires left in our state. So the damage is already done. But in the end, yes, the $10,000 is a limit. But when you look at the overall structure of this tax credit program, of this tax plan that has been rolled out, I think the average citizen, the middle class citizen for whom we are fighting for all the time, that citizen is going to gain, is going to get the advantage, and that's who I'm supporting, that's who I've been fighting for, and I will continue to do that. Not the rich, not the famous, but more importantly, the average citizen. And in this tax plan, you have seen this over and over again. Middle class America, middle class Connecticut will do better. That's what counts.
Steve?
When I was a kid, I loved cheesecake. And my grandmother said, Steve, you gotta eat less cheesecake. And I didn't like eating less cheesecake, but you know what? She was right. I ate a lot of cheesecake. So I think the same thing is true in Connecticut. We're a high-cost state. We have high taxes, and sometimes discipline comes in from places we don't expect it to come from. And that's okay. I think this accelerates what has to happen in Connecticut. The size of our government is outdated. It's too expensive. We can't afford it and doesn't deliver the quality of services that you deserve. So wherever that force comes from, I think we need to embrace it and realize it. And that has to be our long-term focus. But realizing that, I can see looking at tools over a short period, a 1 or 2 year, 3 year period, to phase in and make this less hurtful for people that are impacted like this. There are ideas out there about bringing public-private state charities, right, to allow workarounds, or payroll tax deduction approaches. I'm okay at exploring those things because I think it's fair to the taxpayers of Connecticut, who I'll fight for, to say, we have to get 20% more efficient. This is the way reality is going to be. But you know what? We need a bridge over the next 2 or 3 years to make it a soft landing for you all.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes, thank you very much. As a realtor down in Fairfield County, I have discussed this with other realtors who represent high-end sellers and buyers, and it is not entirely clear what the impact will be, because as Dave mentioned, with the alternative minimum tax, which has been pushed aside, many people, even though they had itemized deductions that they could have taken in the past for property tax, income tax, it was disallowed by the alternative minimum tax. And so this is actually a wake-up call. Just as Connecticut is getting a wake-up call that we have too much government, too much debt, we're too generous. Our state should not be, let's say, the winner of paying our kind and well-meaning employees more than the other 50 states. That has to change for the benefit of the citizens of this state. So it's a state where we want to work, where we want to raise our families, where we want to retire and enjoy our families here. And it's also going around to Republican town committees. The message to local communities that we too have to tighten our belt, because as we've heard, educational cost sharing has been reduced and will continue to be reduced. And so we have to run leaner. And that is the wake-up call to our citizenry. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have a caller that's called in with a question. If you hand me the microphone. It's Amy from Cheshire, Connecticut. What question do you have for the candidates?
I do apologize if there are any questions that we may not know the live picture, but what perspective of the community is going back to the conversation about the sales in Connecticut would be just anybody on channel 9 art that considering toll tax orders, taxes, or toll general in Connecticut, and why?
So any arguments against tolls? That's the question. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we are in the lightning round right now, so if you can give a short answer to the question, are you against tolls, either at the border or internal? And then following that up, you'll have your closing statement. So lightning round, tolls, we'll start with you and go to the right. Lightning round.
Oh, yeah, I am against tolls. You know what they say? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I can assure you, when people talk about lock boxes, when the state government orders a lock box for these tolls, when they order that lock box, they're going to order a mallet that can break that lock box wide open, and they're going to put that mallet behind a piece of glass that says break in emergency only. And how long till that emergency happens? 1 day or 2 days? They're not going to keep it in a lockbox. We cannot afford any more new taxes. Thank you.
Okay, Eric, lightning round on the tolls.
I am for tolls, entry points only, easy pass. Rhode Island's doing it, Massachusetts did it, New York did it. It'll gain revenue to fix the roads, that's well needed, so we don't have to raise taxes on the people.
I promoted tolls with actually the tax deduction for commuters. It's the only way to go. We'll need a waiver to do that. You will have tolls in 2019, whether Republican or Democrat is elected. Right now, the Democrats are looking to put in a tax because they don't want to address tolls during this cycle. Governor's race is in 2018, this year, and so the legislature does not want their Democrat candidate looking like they're going to lose over tolls. Right now, I don't know what everyone else is thinking, but our transportation fund is bankrupt and it's over. And it's not our fault as Republicans, it's the Democrat fault. But you know what? You get a tax deduction, or if you commute, and you shouldn't be imposing the tolls. It's about time. 95 north to Cape Cod, we're picking up the money and we've been losing it. Everyone who lives along the coast knows just the traffic jams that are happening. Out-of-state trucks. But again, we need a waiver from the Federal Department of Transportation, or we will end up with internal tolls, something I oppose.
I'm for reducing taxes, but we need additional revenues in order to be able to improve our infrastructure. Therefore, I'm for what Ronald Reagan would have been for, and he was my first presidential appointment. And that is electronic tolls, where we impose the burden on out-of-state vehicles, trucks, buses, cars, etc. And the way we do that is through using the new technology. We'll toll everybody, which the federal Constitution will require, but we'll give a credit on taxes for Connecticut taxpayers. That does not cause any burden on Connecticut taxpayers, but ends up generating revenues from people that are benefiting using our infrastructure but aren't currently paying for it. We need to do something about the so-called lockbox. We need to have much tougher enforcement mechanisms if it is broken. Because right now, as I said before, we have trust funds that you can't trust and they're not funded. But do not kid yourself. We have to have revenue to improve our infrastructure. That's a user fee, not a tax.
Tolls, I've said this before and I'll say this again. It is another tax on Connecticut residents. This toll will be 70% of the tax will be on Connecticut residents, and only 30% of the revenue is going to be coming from people outside our state. So at the end of the day, we could sit here and say we are going to give a credit back, we will get those waivers. All of that is wishful thinking. We will be losing a lot of our federal resources just because we have chosen that particular path. I am not ready to tax our residents anymore. We have done that enough. We have seen what the consequences are. People are leaving our state. People have already left, and more are leaving on a daily basis. Do we need to fix our transportation? No question about that either. We've talked about that earlier in this discussion this evening. But tolls is not the way to go, and definitely never to think about tolls unless we have the transportation fund that we know will not be raided. That, once again, is wishful thinking. So we have the money coming back from the federal government. That will not happen. The waivers will not happen, and the lockbox will not be a true lockbox. So at the end of the day, unfortunately, our citizens, our residents, to go into work, to come home from work, and for the daily chores and errands, will have no choice but to pay more taxes.
I'd like to rebut that really quick before Steve speaks, please. I'd like to ask the doctor in the legislative session, you are a state representative,
Right.
4%, 4 cents or more tax increase on gas tax for Connecticut residents is going to come up in the legislature this year. How will you vote? Against the gas tax? For the gas tax? And if you vote against the gas tax and you vote against and you don't want tolls, what do we do with the transportation fund? Tell me how you're going to vote on the gas tax that's coming.
On the gas tax, the answer is clear-cut, no.
And so then that's a fairy tale how we're going to
Well,
fund transportation.
Yeah, let me say one other thing. Some of us have a little bit better knowledge of federal policy and have a little bit better contacts in Washington.
Okay.
I know the Secretary of Transportation personally. This can get done. I'm tired of hearing this negativism. You know, you can't override the CBAC contract. You can't have electronic tolls where you don't slow down and we impose the burden on out-of-state vehicles through tax credit. That's a bunch of bunk. We got to get ready. We got to get real. We got to get serious. This ship is sinking. We need to save it.
Steve?
Yeah, thank you. I am for reducing the tax burden on the hardworking people of Connecticut, period. However, as a CEO and someone who is an engineer with a technology background, we have to embrace technology to improve the quality of life for people here and make things affordable. It's as simple as that. Electronic tolling is something that is here, it's part of the present. I don't like going across the border and being charged more than someone else from another state. The state of Massachusetts brings in about $250 to $300 million each and every year. And then you're able to kind of get financing on top of that, back on your roads and bridges. That's why New York's building a new big bridge whenever I go there every year, because they found out a way to pay for it. And they're driving their economy around it. So if you believe that the economy is important to get things going, you want your property values to rise, we need to have the transportation infrastructure in place to move people to jobs and jobs to people. And I'm for tolls from that standpoint, because I don't think that gasoline tax is the way to go.
I want to thank all the candidates for answering all these questions and your responses. Now we're going to our closing statement. And we'll start with Peter and move to his right. You have 2 minutes each.
Thank you very much for listening to all the candidates this evening. Thank you very much to our questioners and to our Mr. Heiser. I have the most vote for me because I have the 5-point fiscal reform plan that is most honest to our citizenry, of going to average to pay our kind and well-meaning state employees at the average of the 50 states. 50 for 20, 50 for 20 years, 50 years of paying pension for 20 years of work is not good government. 401ks from here on out. Clearly have to amend our pensions. The CBAC agreement is unconstitutional, and we cannot afford any new taxes as we will have more citizens leave the state. And that is the reform that we need to save Connecticut. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Eric?
Again, my name is Eric Mastriani Sr. I'm from New Haven, Connecticut. I was a United States Navy Seabee Construction Battalion Equipment Operator. My name is on the War Memorial in Hamden, Connecticut. I've been with Colony Hardware Supply for 19 years. 13 of those years I was a dispatch supervisor / driver. I'm a family, I have 4 children. And again, I thank everyone for inviting me tonight to be part of this forum. And it's a pleasure to be next to these gentlemen who are also running for governor of Connecticut.
I'd like to thank Marty Heiser for having this debate. It's fantastic. It's great to sit here with all these fine candidates working hard. For everyone at home that doesn't know this, it's a lot of work running for governor. It's no child's play. In 2014, when I ran as a petitioning candidate. I can go against my party and register as an independent or any other party. I will be on the ballot this year. I will get the signatures from the Republican voters to be on the primary. I'd like to address what our former chairman, Chris Healy, spoke about in his blog this week, which was what the primary will look like, how I can win, how other people are going to stack up against me. We're looking at potentially 6 candidates, I think maybe 5, but 5 to 6 candidates in the primary. Our former chairman spoke about having 80,000 people turn out. I believe it'll be closer to 125,000. 30,000 votes wins this. I'm a pro-Trump candidate. I'm a Tea Party activist, former West Hartford Republican town councilor. I have a large following. I'm hoping to keep the race positive as can be, and I'm hoping all the candidates with their taxpayer-funded campaigns do not turn against each other the way John McKinney turned on Tom Foley. I didn't touch Tom Foley. John McKinney put out a commercial which was brutal. It was called "You Failed, Ma'am." We cannot have that in the primary season, or the Democrats will win. Thank you.
Marty, thank you very much. Thank you for the journalists who asked questions. Thank you for my colleagues for keeping this civil. I appreciate it very much. I want to thank all of you for viewing. I'm going to just focus on 3 reasons why I believe I'm the best candidate for governor of Connecticut. Look, we have a number of good people that are running, but I think you have to understand you need the right person at the right place at the right time. USS Connecticut was the flagship of the great fleet that sailed around the world when Teddy Roosevelt was president and brought the U.S. out of its cocoon. It has gone from a flagship state to a sinking ship in the last 30 years. We need the best captain that we can get in governor to help save the ship, but we need a great turnaround crew as well. That means the Senate, the House, the Cabinet, and the constitutional officers. We need all of that to be saved. Number 1, I'm the only candidate that's got a proven track record of making government smaller, more economical, more efficient, more effective. I saved the American people, in partnership with GAO, $380 billion in the 10 years that I was Comptroller General of the United States. We can do this, but 2018 is it. Thank you.
Connecticut is in a state of crisis. As a physician, I'm well aware of the importance of addressing the underlying disease. We cannot just treat symptoms. We cannot just have a Band-Aid approach anymore. I make tough decisions in difficult circumstances. I'm able to communicate with people with all walks of life. That's what I do. Look at the problems, analyze them, and come up with a game plan, come up with a solution. Skill sets that are needed to lead the state and work in a very coherent way with the legislature, both the House as well as the Senate. My message, I know, my mission, I know, will connect, will resonate not only with the Republicans, which obviously is critical, but also with the independents, the 60% of our state, and the crossover Democrats. My prescription, pro-growth, pro-business, is what's going to make the difference so that we are in the leadership role come 2018. I am the messenger with a message, and I hope I will be your voice.
Thank you, Marty, and the panelists for having us here tonight. Look, we've been down a road to ruin for 30 years since I graduated from Stanford High by career politicians that care more about their special interests than taking us out of this downward spiral. My path will be different. Number 1, experience. I grew up here, served in the military here. I've created good, hundreds of high-tech paying jobs that we need here in Connecticut. No other candidate in this race has done this. Number 2, ideas. True ideas that bring fiscal stability and a vibrant industry-led ecosystem. No other candidate has experienced that and brought those two together. Number 3, the ability to actually pull this off in the real world, having taken companies from ideas to hundreds of employees, is important. And how you do that, and I've transformed government myself, having government customers at the federal, state, and local level. It is possible, it is doable. And number 4 is trust. Who are you going to trust to get the job done? Where I went to college, the Naval Academy, we had a simple honor code. Midshipmen don't lie, cheat, or steal. And if you want that in your government, and you want to hear that every day, I'm your person. I look forward to earning your vote. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank all the candidates for coming in. I really appreciate it. We talk a lot on this show about the state of Connecticut and what we're up against. I think that each one of these candidates brings a certain skill set, experience. For many people out there that watch this program, I realize that it's skewed pretty much to the liberal Democrat side of things. But I hate to quote our President Donald Trump, but what the hell do you got to lose at this point? Really? I mean, take a walk on the wild side. You know, it still is a private voting booth. They don't monitor that. The NSA hasn't gotten in there somehow. But I think in this state we can do better. I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, and moved out here in 1985. When we had Republicans in the governor's mansion, and we had conservative policies, this state was booming. It breaks my heart to see the situation that we have right now, and I dare say one of these men right here would make an outstanding governor for the state of Connecticut, and we need a turnaround in this state. I want to thank each one of these men for coming out, and when Joe Visconti says running for governor is not easy, it absolutely is not. So I thank them for their time, I thank them for their civic spirit and pride in the state, and I just hope that all of them hold up under the pressure. I want to thank the journalists for joining us as well, Danbury News-Times, Al Robinson, and Mac Reed for your perspective and your questions. And I hope this forum has been informative for you. And above all else, I hope that you get out and vote. It's so important for the future of your state. It's so important for the future of your families. And I think you would do well by voting for one of these men. So thank you all, and we'll see you next week on the Marty Heiser Show. Good night. Thank you. Okay, so we're still...